Hello everyone, welcome to another comic book video. My name is Michael and today we're talking about modern DC comics. Now since most of my collection is modern comics, I'm going to be spreading this out over 3 weeks. Today we're talking about DC. Next week we'll look at Marvel, and then the third week we'll look at some more of the other different companies as well. So to start off with, in 1989, Warner Communications and Time Inc. Merged together to form Time Warner. At that point in time, DC was already owned by Warner Communications, but the companies joined. During the early 90s, when you still had that speculators boom going on, and DC got into that as well. One of the ways they tried to increase sales and stuff during this time period is they did certain events. They also pretty much did certain things to some of their superheroes. They did storylines that they knew would get headlines pretty much. During this time period, you had the early 90s, you had the death of Superman, you had a storyline called Nightfall when you had Batman fight Bane and get his back broken. You had with Green Lantern, you had Hal Jordan pretty much go insane and he become a villain called Parallax. So they were doing some of these different storylines for the heroes to try and boost sales by pretty much taking these classic characters out of the picture for a while and introducing new characters who kind of took over the titles for a brief time period. Of course, once sales started dropping, they usually brought back the main hero, like Superman was only dead for about a year, and then he came back. Bruce Wayne was not Batman for only like about a year or something before he came back. So these are usually only brief time periods. Now with Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner takes over the mantle of Green Lantern. He actually is the main Green Lantern for about a decade. So you had that going on. You also had during this time period, DC starts some different imprints, and they also bought out some companies. In like the mid to late 90s, they bought out Wildstorm. They also formed an agreement with Milestone to help distribute some of their comics. Milestone was a company that was actually started to bring more diversity into the comic field. It was started by a lot of African American creators to introduce some more African American heroes. DC in the early days helped with the distribution, and eventually they also got some of the rights to some of those characters that started appearing in their own comics as well. You also had DC in '93 start their Vertigo imprint, which was an imprint to do more mature, more adult comics. This was stuff that would not fall under the Comics Code Authority. It was stuff that was considered more for adults. However, by the early 90s, the Comics Code Authority was pretty much holding to just in name only. It really didn't have much authority or power anymore. And usually by the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s, more and more comic titles start dropping the Comics Code logo to the point where it disappears altogether. So also you had the 90s. In '96, after the collapse of the speculators market, Marvel and DC got together to do a crossover called Marvel vs. DC, where they pitted their superheroes from each respective companies against each other. They also did some team-ups during this time period, like they had Spider-Man team up with Batman and stuff like that. You had some major events happen, like Zero Hour, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, and sometimes with these different events they tried to reboot or update their line. And then in 2011 they actually did a whole company reboot called the New 52, where they pretty much just wanted to just reboot the entire storyline stuff. So they took everything back to like the very beginning. They showed like the early days of Superman, like the early days of Wonder Woman. It wasn't a complete reboot though, because some of the more popular storylines, like with Batman and with Green Lantern, actually continued from previously. They just kind of crunched things together, and they did do some changes. Like for instance, with Batman, they got rid of the whole pretty much Tim Drake's tenure as Robin. Instead gave him the name Red Robin and said like he had his own separate career. So, and then the New 52 kind of met with some mixed results. Some storylines did really well, other ones did not. And then in 2016, DC went ahead and did another relaunch, which they call Rebirth, where the storyline is they found out that the New 52 universe got started because a character from Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan, had come into the universe and had messed with the DC Universe timeline, such as he made sure like the Justice Society never formed and did some other things as well. And that's where kind of the storyline's been going, is some ways picking up from what happened during that time period. So I brought in some comics today just to show some different stuff from DC Modern. For instance, I brought in Green Lantern 50 from 1994. This is actually part of that storyline where Hal Jordan kind of goes insane and becomes Parallax. And this issue actually is a very big issue from that storyline. It had the death of Sinestro. It also had the first appearance of Hal Jordan as the character Parallax, and also had the first appearance of Kyle Rayner as Green Lantern. So that came out this issue, so this was part of that whole storyline there with Green Lantern. I also brought in this. This is Flash, the Fastest Man Alive, #1. This is the first appearance of Bart Allen as the Flash. There was this brief time period where they had Wally West disappear, and Bart Allen briefly takes over as Flash. He only lasted up the Flash for about a year after, and then he actually gets killed off towards the end of this storyline. Next we have Action Comics #1. This is when the New 52. This was the launch of the New 52 Action Comics. So this series kind of introduced Superman like in his very early days when he was just starting out as Superman. Just some of the stuff that was going on, but this is part of that whole New 52 storyline. This is DC Universe Rebirth. This was just meant to kind of introduce when they were starting the relaunch of Rebirth. This was just a standalone issue where they started planting different seeds and stuff and stories that would be coming out over the next couple of years, and just what's been going on with the DC Universe. So this is just a lot of little stories just laying the groundwork for future relaunches of titles and just what future line stories are going to be. This also had the first appearance of Gotham and Gotham Girl, two characters that will be appearing within the we're going to be appearing in Batman over Tom King's run as Batman. And then this one is actually Doomsday Clock #1. This was actually a storyline where the DC characters find out about Dr. Manhattan, that he's been doing some stuff with the Time Stream. You had some other characters of Watchmen show up as well, as they actually make the crossover from their universe to the DC universe to try and locate Dr. Manhattan. This issue also has the first appearance of Mime and Marionette, and also the first appearance of the second Rorschach. It's also a variant cover, and as you can see, if you move it, it does change. So that's everything today about with DC. Like I said, next week we're going to look about Marvel, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, just go ahead and give it a like, and I'll see you next time. Bye.